Hey everyone, what's going on? I'm Jeff Noble. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to install Visual Studio 2019. This is the Noble Cause Software Development course. All right, so let's get started installing Visual Studio. We'll go to visualstudio.microsoft.com. And from there, once that page renders, you'll see that there are 3 versions of Visual Studio. The first version is for the Windows platform. You can see that by the little Windows logo on the top there. You also have a choice of Visual Studio for Mac if you're on Mac. You'll be able to use Mac for this course, but you might not be able to follow along step by step. You may have to Google some things along the way or ask some questions. All of my examples will be Visual Studio for Windows. And the last one is Visual Studio Code, which we will use for this course, but we're not going to get to that for a while. So we'll go ahead and just choose the Visual Studio for Windows, the first one. If we look in the drop down below it, you'll see 3 editions. We're going to choose Community 2019. That's the free edition. The other 2 editions that are there are paid versions. And honestly, there's really very little you can't do with the free versions. So go ahead and click on Community 2019. And your download should begin. It's really very small. It will download the pieces that it needs once we select what parts of Visual Studio we want to use. So go ahead and click the download file and launch that installer. So the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to have to install the installer. So we'll go ahead and click continue and let it download and install the bytes that it needs to get things started so we can make our selections. Okay, so once that's all installed, it will bring up the Visual Studio installer dialog. Here's where we can choose the pieces of Visual Studio that we're going to need. So let's put a check in the ASP.NET and web development checkbox. We'll also put in Azure development. We're going to skip the Node.js development, although we will do some Node. We won't be using Visual Studio for that. We will put a check in the .NET desktop development. And if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we want to make sure we check .NET Core cross-platform development. That's where we're going to spend the majority of our time. You can just go ahead and click the install button at the bottom of the dialog. After that, you'll probably want to go grab a coffee or a tea or a beer or your beverage of choice and wait for those things to finish installing. Okay, so once those things are done installing, Visual Studio will actually launch. And the first time it launches, your screen may or may not look exactly like mine. If you have a Microsoft account, which would be an old Hotmail account or an Outlook.com email account, at one point there were Live.com accounts. So if you have one of those Microsoft accounts, then you can click sign in on this dialog and actually log in. You don't have to do this. You can click the not now, maybe later at the bottom. Or if you want one, you can click the no account, create one link in that dialog. So here's my thoughts on this. All that this is really used for is to save your preferences. If you like dark mode, if you set up some options in Visual Studio and you want to move these to another computer eventually, maybe you upgrade at some point, or you want to install Visual Studio on more than one computer, maybe at home and at work. If you have permission to do that at work, check with that. It's just a convenience factor. I definitely recommend doing it. You'll see that when I sign in, it's going to know that I like dark mode and it's going to download the theme, or at least it'll set the theme up and go to dark mode automatically. So it just makes things easier when setting up a new computer. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click sign in. And I'm going to put in my email address. And in my case, I have it set up for two-factor authentication. That's another whole subject. But just go ahead and log in with the account that either you just created that you're going to use, or just go ahead and give it your password, however you set up your login with your Microsoft account. And this is where it will log you in and download all of your preferences. If it's your first time logging in and there are no preferences, you're going to see an additional dialog that pops up now. And it's going to ask you how you want to set up your environment. So I would recommend choosing general from the drop down list and then choose your theme of dark mode or light mode. And there's really no difference. It's personal preference. All of my lessons in this course will be in dark mode. So if you want yours to look the same, choose dark mode, but really it doesn't matter. I'll go ahead and close the Visual Studio installer. And you'll see in a second that it will turn on my dark theme because I'm logged in with my Microsoft account. And that's it. You're all installed with Visual Studio, ready for the course. If you want to close this and ever get back to this point, because this is where the classes are going to start. So if you want to get back to this point, you could just click the Start menu, and under V in the list of applications, you'll see Visual Studio 2019. And you could just click that and it will launch right back to this spot. So that's it. That's everything you need for the web server install and Visual Studio 2019 install. And we're ready to go. So let's jump into the first class and we'll see you online.